Joining us for more on this and a live report, a live update from Russia right now is Fred Weir. He's the Russian affairs expert. He's the Russia correspondent for the Boston-based Christian Science Monitor. Thank you so much, Fred Weir. Joe Biden, the U.S. president, having 3 days of emergency meetings with allies. The narrative of the reports coming out of there are that Western leaders have shown a united front against Russia's invasion. This is a visit, a meeting. All of these meetings would have been closely watched in Russia. Joe Biden says today that Russia has been taken by surprise by how united NATO leaders have been. How is this visit being seen in Russia? How is it being reported in Russia?
It's being reported. I don't think anybody's surprised. There has been this solid wall of Western unity from the start of this awful war, and people are pretty well aware of the barrage of sanctions, the rhetoric, the fact that Russia is badly losing the information war, at least. But there has been no change in the strategic picture. The leaders of NATO, and Joe Biden reiterated this clearly, will defend NATO territory. They're quite adamant about that. And they will support Ukraine with all sorts of assistance, including arms of various types. But they will not intervene directly. There'll be no boots on the ground, no fly zone, no peacekeeping troops. None of the things that are being discussed in some circles in the West are going to happen. And that's also been how things were from the beginning. And hopefully, since that seems like a pretty short route to World War III, things will stay that way.
Well, there has been some change, though. Joe Biden's visit, President Biden's visit, has come at a time when a senior Russian army officer has said that the first phase of its military campaign in Ukraine is over. It's now going to be focusing on the eastern Donbas region. As you report from Russia, how is this being seen? Because military analysts in the West are reporting this to be a shift in Russia's strategy, an admission by Moscow that its pre-war strategy has failed.
Well, from the beginning, Russia's political objectives have been pretty clear and pretty well stated. Its military objectives have been not clear, and so they've been subject to interpretation. That's one interpretation. I mean, you hear it from the West, they're bogged down, there's a stalemate, they're losing, et cetera, et cetera. The narrative from the defense ministry here is quite different, that they have accomplished most of their initial goals, which is to reduce the Ukrainian military potential, and they gave figures for how dramatically they have done that, destroyed a lot of infrastructure, and that now the main goal of the Russian operation, after having encircled cities, they say they never intended to storm Kiev or Kharkiv. That was not their goal. Their goal was to bypass them, surround them, but bypass them. And if you look at those maps, their goal is to create an encirclement of the Ukrainian army in the Donbas. The main Ukrainian force, in fact, maybe 60 to 80,000 men, the regular army, is concentrated in the Donbas, and the Russians are coming from the north and south to using a classic Soviet military maneuver. I mean, it's what they did to the Germans at Kursk, creating a cauldron, what they call a cauldron that will surround and destroy that army. That seems, I mean, even Western military experts, if not journalists, are admitting that seems to be a very real possibility.
So then is this, as some are reporting, maybe perhaps a watershed moment, because is this that moment of de-escalation that everyone has been looking for?
I doubt it. I follow these talks because I'm an optimist and I hate this war. I hate everything about it, and I live here in Russia, and I'm terrified of the future. So I follow the talks every day, and they do go on, and it's clear that neither side is at a point where they're willing to agree on any substantial things. Therefore, the war will go on. and until there is some kind of an outcome, at least some significant outcome. And I don't know about you, but I've covered wars before, and everybody expects them to be over in 3 days, or that every news show that people expect that there should be something decisive to report, but instead they just grind on and on until something decisive happens. I think this is going to grind on for a while.
And Fred, back home, how much of a challenge has this been for the U.S. President Joe Biden? His comments are a sharp contrast, of course, from his predecessor, whose foreign policy was America first, who called NATO obsolete. So Joe Biden really having a lot to overcome to get to a point where he can get NATO together.
Well, I don't get me wrong, but I think this is sort of a godsend for Biden, because he was in deep political trouble at home, and there's nothing like a crisis, a war, something like this to galvanize public attention and let a politician act presidential, like a war president, which is what Biden is doing, and he's doing it pretty well. I think his positives are rising in America. His problem is that there is a deep disaffection with the inflation, rising fuel prices. He himself mentioned the danger of food shortages yesterday, and when he was in Poland, and that's got to strike terror in people's hearts. So he's got serious problems, but it's nothing to do with Trump. It's to do with how to manage this crisis and make himself look like the leader he wants to be, and he's succeeding pretty well so far.
Well, history repeats itself. Thank you so much, Fred Weir, and thank you. Stay safe, all the best, and thank you for joining us.